Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Notre Dame for those of you who are visiting. And welcome to this crash course, AI in the Wild. My name is Kat Regala, and I'm a senior here at Notre Dame, majoring in the program of Liberal Studies, a great books seminar-based program that spans art, history, literature, natural science, philosophy, politics, and theology. You may be wondering why I, a humanities major, is introducing a class on AI. Supplementing my liberal arts major, I minor in computing and digital technologies, or CDT. Through CDT, I've taken classes in computing, visual communication design, media and technology studies, digital forensic analysis, the intersection of cybercrime and law, and of course, AI. I was a student in the first iteration of Generative AI in the Wild, one of Notre Dame's first courses on generative AI, and I now work as a TA for the class, which is co-taught by Dr. John Behrens and Dr. Alexi Orchard, who I'm here to introduce today. Dr. B is a professor of the practice and director of the Technology and Digital Studies program. Dr. B has over 20 years of industry experience, including his most recent industry role as Vice President of AI Product Development at Pearson, a global education company. Dr. B has more than 50 publications related to data science and the application of advanced technologies to teaching and learning, and was a tenured professor of educational data science before he entered industry. He is known both for his technical expertise and impeccable sense of humor. Starting this fall, Dr. Alexi Orchard is an assistant teaching professor in the Technology and Digital Studies program. She's also the director of undergraduate studies for the IDZIC minor in computing and digital technologies. Dr. Orchard joins us most recently from the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Canada, where she earned her PhD in English and Experimental Digital Media and was the manager of the Critical Media Lab at Waterloo, a cross-disciplinary digital design facility dedicated to investigating the impacts of technology on the more than human world. While Dr. Orchard is new to both the United States and Notre Dame, she has already become an integral part of the Technology and Digital Studies program and is quickly adapting to Dr. B's jokes. Today, Dr. B and Dr. Orchard will provide a glimpse into AI in the real world, demonstrating exciting technology and showcasing the incredible capabilities of artificial intelligence. More importantly, they will highlight the critical intersection between the liberal arts and technology. Here at Notre Dame, we emphasize the responsibility to be a force for good in the world. Whether you are an AI skeptic or enthusiast, the reality is that AI is shaping the world that we live in. To engage meaningfully with it, we must understand what AI is, its limitations, and what we as a society want it to achieve. Every discipline, especially the liberal arts, plays a vital role in shaping the ethical and thoughtful use of AI. I hope you enjoyed today's talk, and go Irish!
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Pat. And I don't really know if these jokes are ever going to from Dr. B, pass on. So we're going to give you a taste of what this generative AI in the wild class is like today. But first, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction into what the Technology and Digital Studies program is. Within our program, we talk about, at a high level, questions around how do we best create, use, and guide the uses of technology, and how do we align them with human flourishing and the common good. So the three main programs that we have that kind of support this goal are our Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science, our minor in Data Science, and our IDZIC Computing and Digital Technologies minor. All right. Thinking about some big picture context as to this course, as to why this course belongs in this minor, and what students might get out of it. Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to your students, to your children, to your parents and grandparents? Big picture stuff here. AI is big and real. If you hadn't heard of it, it is changing so many things, everything in our daily lives, in our school, in our education, in our personal relationships. And those strong indicators that it is not going away. Because of this, we may need to change. We need to adapt the things that we do in our daily lives, the way that we think about each other and relate to technology. And You can change as slow or as fast as you want, but we're gonna have to adapt, and we think about that every single day in every single class. We think about ways that we need to adapt. And lastly, the train has already left the station. So as I said before, we need to prepare ourselves with the knowledge and skills that are required to keep up with this train as it may be. But the thing is, even though it's left the station, we're still getting prepared. This is an early class in terms that we're just started offering it. We're already seeing really big impacts of generative AI. As I said, in education, from K to 12, in post-secondary and in professional training as well, in the workplace, and in our personal relationships. But we are also interested in what you think. So we're gonna start with a little bit of engagement with the crowd. And so when you find someone next to you, you're gonna introduce yourself and discuss with your neighbor. You can choose one of these big questions, or you can try to tackle all three. The first question is related to education. So it asks, does generative AI enhance or detract from personal development, experiences, and values? Secondly, thinking about labor, what kinds of jobs will emerge or be eliminated as a result of widespread adoption of generative AI? And then thinking about our communities, both locally and globally, what kind of social norms, etiquette, and traditions might change because of generative AI. So I'm going to pass it over to you to talk to your neighbor for the next few minutes, and then we're going to circle back, just as we might if we were in university class today. So please, let's do it. Would anybody like to volunteer to discuss briefly what they talk about with their neighbor, related to any of the three questions? Yes?
There's a disparity in, depending on the area that you work, how much you're exposed to AI. So, I work in medicine, and people in the trenches doing patient care may not have, a lot of my colleagues, we don't use it at all yet. And you were saying in the nonprofit world, right?
Right.
There's a disparity about whether or not people get exposed to it, so.
97% of America's nonprofits have revenue.
Here.
97% of America's nonprofits have revenue of less than $5 billion. And we don't have access to any of this stuff. And we know that it's going on because we read mainstream media, but we don't know.
So just to be loud, their point is that there's disparity in what kind of jobs are exposed to generative AI. And I think this is really interesting because we now have students who think that their job, no matter what, will be impacted by AI. But in the trenches, as you say, it may or may not be relevant. It may or may not be allowed. So if you're going to see people making policies as to the workplace, we're not using generative AI. My questions are around that are in the tune of, what values does your workplace have? What values does your business have? Where are you seeing this aligning with your business's values and aligning with your customers' values, as if you're a customer-facing kind of business? So yeah, we could definitely see some change or some resistance to change in that respect. Does anyone have another point? Yes, up in the corner.
I would like, because I know what AI is, but I don't understand what generative AI is. I would like a brief description of that.
Yes, and so in about 2 slides, that's exactly what we're going to do. But yes, I appreciate you bringing that knowledge in because we're obviously seeing in the media a lot of different definitions of what it actually is. This is leading to misinformation about how technology is going to impact people. Having different digital literacies is an incredibly important thing to consider and to hopefully improve. So hold your horses. Any other folks that want to point to a question? Yes, please.
Yeah, I work as an environmental regulatory specialist, and I have some concern that, my decades of learning and expertise could be quickly surpassed. And the need for me would son, who's a student of this department, has assured me I'll stay employed at least until this tuition.
How convenient for him. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we'll chat a little bit about today is how is reskilling going to work for people who are further along in their careers? And how are people going to be able to adapt to that if, we find it, we'll talk about what AI is good at and what it's not good at today, and I'm sure there are human aspects of your job that AI is potentially not very good at. So if you be really good at those things, it'll be okay. Up in the back, last person.
One of the things that came up with us a lot is that eventually this gets to the philosophical questions of where is that line of what it means to be human or to augment it with a human role or thinking or creativity. And there's, I think, a lot of thinking that's going to have to go into how we deal with and treat these things and how we choose to regulate them. I think we're behind on a lot of that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the number one thing that I think about when I go to teach this class is how do I incentivize students to care about their own humanity and the humanities of people all around the world. We recently had a visitor who works in industry, and he said, I don't spend too much time thinking about the social impacts of the technology that we build because it's so much harder than actually just building the technology that we build. So we need to have multiple people in those conversations, and people who traditionally haven't had deep thoughts philosophically are going to be met with those thoughts pretty quickly, I imagine. So yeah, this slide on broader impacts touches on what we've been talking about here. At a high level, this isn't an exhaustive list of the kinds of topics we have in this class, but it touches upon some important things. Education, so fundamentally at the university, no matter what domain that you are in, people are thinking about how to develop digital literacy, just to know what this technology is, what it can do, what it could potentially do, and importantly, what it cannot do. And these things, having this literacy about it is going to enable more creativity and human expression. It's going to enable better critical thinking and hopefully foster better social development rather than hinder those things. This kind of bleeds into thinking about the future of work, and as we've been talking about, an unpredictable job market and the implications of reskilling. There's kind of this weird tension right now where we have students that they want to stay in touch with the things that they're good at, even in the face of the fact that they might be replaced, or that they might be at a competitive disadvantage when they go into the job market and say they're just as good as someone else at their job, but they do it a little bit less efficiently because they don't plug it into some sort of generative model. And so it's kind of a question about classes that do teach with generative AI and classes that prohibit use of generative AI, because we don't want students to be unprepared, but we don't want students to lose this innate human skills and competencies that they need to continue to be good humans and workers. And then lastly, over on the right side, at a high level, talking about rights and public welfare, we're going to see a lot of changes in terms of policy and governance, and how that relates to things like privacy, bias and discrimination, and really importantly, misinformation, not only about technology, but about news, politics, the environment, and everything else that people are, have polarizing opinions about. Generative AI could be implicated in those types of concerns. So there's a lot to unpack, more than we can do in this 1 hour session, but I appreciate you getting your wheels turned with me and bringing those concerns up. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my co-instructor, Dr. B.
Thank you, Alex. All right. So as we've already seen in the class, there's issues about how it works, how to use it and its possibilities, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. But we also, as you've already seen, talk very deeply and carefully about how to understand its impacts and its possibilities. So we try to balance appropriate use and possibility, how to do it, and how to think about it and use it in society. Let's start just with a little something about what AI is. You can have a whole class about defining it, but for our purposes, we're just going to say that AI is software that does things that previously we thought only humans could do. And the thing about that is it's a perceptual issue. It's not something you can just define, well, use this technology or use that technology. That doesn't really matter. What matters is your perception that it's something only humans could do before. And this is important because it changes. You know, I'm 126 years old, so I remember way back in the day when spell check was AI. And when it first came out, I was like, how is spell check even going to work? I don't know what word I'm looking for. How's a computer going to know what word I'm looking for? Well, the way it worked is data. And what they did is they figured out, well, they look at all the typing in your computer when people would first have this word, and then they would change it to that word. And then they would have this word, and then they would change it to that word. And data, what it rules, it was data, and the data drove spell check. And then the data drove grammar check. And now we have grammar generation. And that's one of the fundamental things about how computing has evolved. Now, in the AI space, in the generative AI space, and I'll talk about what generative means in a second, there's kind of two branches. There's kind of the artistic branch with image generation, and then there's, or an expressive, let's say, and then there's the text branch. Today, given our limited time, we're going to focus on the text branch. But in the class, we also talk about the creative artistic branch, and that branch is booming not only with image generation, but also movie generation, sound generation, music generation, all kinds of stuff. This idea that computers have changed because of the use of data is an important one, and I want to kind of step way back and look at the last 50 years. Okay, this is big because what's happening in computing is you feel a little rub, like, oh, that's strange. It doesn't look like it's working, or that's strange. But there's a bigger thing going on. And the big thing is, for many, many years, we had traditional programming. And if you went to college a long time ago, even a few years ago, you learned, even now, you learn traditional programming. In traditional programming, you learn a language like Fortran, or COBOL, or Python. And in that, you give the computer very, very specific instructions. The instructions look like, if I press the key, I want this file to open. If I press this other key, I want Mario to jump from one mushroom to another mushroom. So the computer is told exactly how to behave, and we call that deterministic. You determine, the programmer completely determines how the computer is going to behave. Sometimes you're surprised because you wrote the rules wrong, but it's always following the rules. As I mentioned, computers started to evolve in how we would make computers and how we would make software in the last 15 or 20 years to be more and more data-driven. For instance, Amazon will recommend, John, when you like blue shoes, let me recommend black shoes. Nobody went in and wrote a rule that says, John, recommend more black shoes. Just like the spell check, the system is being driven by data. It says people in general, we know from the data, people in general that like black shoes are more likely to buy blue shoes. And so when John's data looks like that, we're going to do this thing. There's no rule for me. There's general rules that have been automatically generated out of the data. And this is machine learning or statistical modeling. Now, with generative AI, we've gone a whole other level in terms of how computers work and the behavior of computers. Because what happens, as we're going to see in generative AI, is they put all these documents into a giant statistical model. And then the model basically predicts how humans would speak, or how humans would write computer code. And because of that, there's no rules anymore. There's not even a tight model. There's a whole bunch of behavior that we have to get out of the computer, almost like we're tricking it to behave, which is the complete opposite of how we would do it just a few years ago. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, like how do you trick it to behave the way you want based on how it's made. But first, because I'm a professor, we're going to do a quiz. Now, it's not a quiz like we're trying to find out where to go. We don't know. It's a quiz about thinking. So they're going to be true and false questions. We're going to talk about it. First question. Generative text systems, which are ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot, are best described as search engines on steroids. Anybody? Let's think about it. Are they search engines on steroids? Just super good search engines, super good Google? How many people think it's true? Anybody think it's true? Got a couple? Anyone think it's false? Okay. You have a full stack shirt on, is that what it says? Why do you think it's false?
Because it's not searching, when it is predicting text, it is predicting the next token, the next token, in a set of words.
Yeah, so these systems, you're right, these systems, the way Google works, it's a paradigm called information retrieval. You index the internet, all the things on the internet, just like a giant library catalog, and then you kind of pull some up to retrieve the information. And that's the way a lot of things have worked, and that's how we experience computers. But in generative AI, what happens is, as she said, it predicts the next word. It's taken all these words, all these millions of words, and put together a statistical model generates the next word. So it's not finding information and getting to it, it's actually recreating it or generating it. Good. But this is an important distinction because I tell the students sometimes, we've been doing Google so long, we have Google brain. Like we sit down, we think the thing's going to act like Google. It's not. It's different. All right, we talked about that. All right, next question. These systems actually don't know anything. They just make sentences regardless of truth. Now, sometimes in class I'll say, kind of like a politician, but we won't say that. All right. Anybody? Based on the conversation, we kind of started going in this direction a little bit. Anybody think that that is false? All right. This is true because of what we just talked about. It's a little complicated, but we're going to go about it. It's kind of like this. The companies take data from wherever they can get it, mostly the internet, databases, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes they have it, sometimes they find it. Then they put it in this giant statistical model, and the model, like I said, what it does is relates the probabilities of words associated with other words. So this word is often followed by that word, this set of words is followed by that word, this set of words is followed by that set of words. All these kind of correlations between words. It's not exactly that way, but it's the general idea. And like the ChatGPT statistical model has 175 billion. You kind of think of them like correlations. They're not exactly that, but 175 billion correlations between words. Can you imagine? And that's why it's so good when you give it a prompt, you give it a little bit of words, it says what words should follow that. And we all know it should be 407 years ago. That's it. There's data, and the data could be really rich or not so great, could be really focused on a specific topic, like just medicine, or it could be all kind of text we found. The model could be really big, try to do a lot of things, or really focused. The prompt is what we do. That's our part. And then the output. 90% of how this works is really, I'm not kidding, like it's really prediction. This is the fundamental logic. They do other things later in the process to make it work better, but this is 90% of the process. And so if you have a sentence like the best thing about its ability to, the system actually makes a probability table like that, and then we'll pick one of those words. It doesn't always pick the highest probability word because then it sounds flat. So there's different ways you can decide how to pick out the set. So it makes a set, and then it picks a word. And then it just adds the word to the end, and then it repeats it, and repeats it, and repeats it, and repeats it. That's it. If you told me 10 years ago this would have worked, I would have told you you were crazy. But that's how these things work, by and large. So they're the world's best word suggester, but they don't know anything. They don't have any awareness. There's no model of truth. There's only probabilities of words. But the crazy thing is, in many situations, that's enough. It works well enough. That's why we're all amazed sometimes. So the way I think about it, then, well, how do we know when it's going to work and not work? Well, there's a couple ways. But one way that I think about it is the data that it's on. I always said that the data is really important, but the task is also really important. So if it has been given a lot of data on something, well, then the probabilities are going to be stronger. It'll be better. I've seen it a lot. I've seen that pattern. I've seen the Gettysburg Address. It always is the same. So it's seen the Gettysburg Address a lot, and the Gettysburg Address is highly predictable. There's only one version. There might be two versions. You know what's not highly predictable? Describe John Barron's third grade summer. That's hard to predict. There's no data. It doesn't have any data about my third grade summer, and third grade summers vary so much. Poems. Hard to predict. Now, of all the kind of text out there on the internet, what kind of data do you think is the most predictable and exists the most? Anybody have any ideas?
Code.
What did you say?
Code.
Code. Computer code. That's right. I thought you said code for a second. I was trying to figure that out. Computer code. Because computer software developers, they have all this digital records. They store it in places. One of the places they store it is a place called GitHub. GitHub is a place you can share it or keep it private, but it's a repository, and many software developers keep their code there. And guess who bought it 5 years ago? Microsoft. Microsoft bought it, and guess what one of Microsoft's biggest products is right now? Automated code generation. I don't know if you remember, 10 years ago, there was all this big talk about big data. Big data was going to change everything. But then it didn't really. But now it is. And the reason it is because we have the compute. We have the compute to take advantage of it now. And so, Microsoft is sitting on that text data, and they're so happy. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this beautiful code. We can put it in our models, and it will recommend things. Google, 20 years ago, remember, they started scanning all the books in the world that they could find. They got in a lot of trouble with the publishers. Guess what they did with that? Oh, look at all this text we have. We know how humans talk. We can use that. So, all these things are a mix of technology and law and business and all these different goals. That's how I think about it. Code up there. Description of John's third grade summer in the bottom, and then different kind of combinations in different places. All right, true or false? You cannot trust a language generating system because it may hallucinate. Does anybody think this is true? Anybody think this is false? Oh, got a wiggly hand. What's the wiggly hand mean?
It can be both in some cases.
Could be both, that's right. Sometimes it might, sometimes it might not. But my real answer is, can you rephrase the question? The first thing is like, what do we mean when we say hallucinate? Does anybody have a definition? Yes?
The AI gives you obviously wrong or faulty answers.
It gives you obviously wrong or faulty answers. Okay. Anybody have another definition? Yeah.
Make stuff up.
Make stuff up. Okay. Well, here's my question. If the way these things work is they just predict the next word, then maybe everything's a hallucination. So that's question one. Question two is, if I ask it for my third grade summer, is that a hallucination? Oh yeah, remember these guys. Are these wrong or right? Are these hallucinations or are these correct answers? You know, sometimes when I give these talks, I say, in half the university, there's no such thing as a hallucination. Because in the art department, everything's a hallucination. That's what they're trying to teach you to do. There's no right answer. It's expression. Now, in the engineering department, they might really care about hallucinations in a big way. Okay? So the definition of hallucination, the goal you have there is going to affect how you think about whether it's doing the right thing or not. So here we're going to go to ChatGPT. There's, like I said, there's other systems, but this is the one we're going to use today. And we're just going to say this little prompt. So this is the prompt. We're going to put it in here. And it says, you are an expert in university communications. Write a press release that John Barrett is the new provost at Notre Dame. He's an AI expert. Think step by step. And this has seen millions of examples of press releases, and it's going to do a great job. The prompt to announce the appointment, blah, blah, blah. Over the years, I have all this. Put in a quote. Oh, this is good. Actually tell me the steps. And here it makes it, well, I'm honored to join the University of Notre Dame, said John. Notre Dame is a place where faith, education, technology intersect in exciting ways. Thank you. Barrett holds the fill in the degree from the institution, blah, blah, blah. It is interesting. This is the first, I've done this hundreds of times. This is the first time I actually gave you the steps. But usually around 3/4 in, yeah, here it is. I'm honored to join the university as the next provost. Okay, but here's where it gets fun. Because here's what we're going to do. Now, is that a hallucination or is it just following directions? Unless you're in the marketing department, then it's following directions. Okay. And this is what's happening all over industries. People are saying, Joe Schmo is the new provost, write the press release, and then I'm going to add it. But then, you can say, leave out the steps, and rewrite it for a 5th grader. Here's a simplified version for a 5th grader. It's excited to announce John Barrett has been chosen as the new provost. The provost is a very important leader who helps run the university. He's an expert in AI, which means he studies how computers can think and solve problems like humans. I worked in schools for many years and famous for my smart ideas about technology. Okay? It doesn't know me, it just has a statistical model of how words go together. And it can change the genre. So in business, people, maybe they wrote a memo for a CEO, and then they're going to change that memo for a manager. Or they have a customer. Some customers have one education level. Some customers have another education level. Some customers use one language. Some customers use another language. This is how these things are being used all over industry all the time. Really revolutionizing these kinds of things. And then, of course, you can say, just rewrite that in Spanish. Now, these things are usually pretty good at language. They were originally actually developed for translation. So for human language, they usually do it really well. Now, I know a little Spanish, so usually I can tell. But sometimes I run a demo and it's in Latin. And when it's in Latin, I have no idea whether it's a good translation or not. So there's a point at which it always goes back to, is it, if it's doing a good job or not, you need to have the expertise to make that evaluation. If you don't know, could be anything going on. So sometimes it hallucinates because of data, sometimes it hallucinates because you asked it to hallucinate and you didn't think about it. Alright, true or false? Most of these systems are bad at math, but great at computer coding. Anybody have any thoughts about this? Yes?
Define math.
Ah, that's a good one. Define math. Not this late in the day. Yeah. Back there?
I know some of the newer ones have been competing in math competitions and been performing as well as some top.
Yeah, so that's right. We just had a discussion about this in the department today. There's some new technologies that are being applied. They're not applied to these kind of standard technologies yet, but that's a big area of growth, is that kind of work in AI. But in the standard systems that are language-based like this, mostly they're not very good at math at all. And the reason is because they're word predictors, they're token predictors, they're symbol predictors. So if you are counting, pretty easy, 5 comes after 4. But if you're in the middle of a complex calculus problem, what comes after 4? Depends on lots of things. So these systems have actually been getting better and better at those kind of things, but in general, they're not that great. But let's just go back and ask it a different way. We're gonna make a new window. And I'm gonna say, what's the square root of 100,000? And it just told me. So that means, most likely, somewhere in there, it had seen that, and it's part of the prediction model. But what if I say, what is the square root of, no, it shouldn't have letters in there. Does anybody know what it's going to do? It's going to do what it's really good at, which is computer code. It's writing a computer program. It just wrote a computer program in Python, sent it to another part of its computer, ran the computer software, got the answer, and brought it back. Remember I talked about deterministic programming and probabilistic programming? It used a very creative but hard to replicate probabilistic programming part. Used how it's so good at computer code and made a deterministic program so it could count on the answer. Combining the two paradigms. And this is something we're going to see more and more. Not just one thing, not just another thing, but combining the paradigms, evolving over time. So that's the crazy thing. So sometimes people say, oh, ChatGPT is a large language model. Well, it is a large language model, but it's also a software interpreter. It also will browse the web. So these are becoming more and more like complex products and not just a model. So you have to be careful because these things have really evolved over the last year. Now, so let's just kind of summarize. This is not a perfect summary, but let's just summarize. These things are good at sounding like humans. They're good at summarization. They're great at summarization. Lots of people use it for getting new ideas, checking your work, writing computer code. They're really good at sentiment and classification. Specific genres, press releases, job descriptions. Job descriptions are easy. It's really good at job descriptions. Let's do one of those. Write a job description for a milling machine operator. It is seeing millions of job descriptions. This is one of the things I hated the most when I was in the industry, was writing job descriptions. You would basically go to one website, you'd go to another, you'd try to get the average of it. ChatGPT's already done that. All this stuff, blah, 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 blah. But then you can also say, rewrite that to be enticing to an early career person. Now instead of saying, here's all the boring skills we want you to have, it usually will say something like, John, your demo's not going to work. Oh, maybe because I stopped it before. Are you passionate about working with your hands and either in a rewarding career in manufacturing? Get trained by the best. Operate advanced machines. Have vacations in Hawaii. So, same general idea. Is it a hallucination or is it following directions? And this is what's going on in these systems. Now, we saw serving as the right aid. We saw about math. We saw about taking information and reworking it. Well, not so good at math, it's just language. Not so good at specific facts if there's not enough data. Not so good at long passages, but that's changing rapidly. But the big thing here is, you don't know what it's going to say. So don't create anything that you just send out without checking. Your brand, your job is dependent on it. It's still just a tool. And we get confused sometimes emotionally, sometimes we talk to it, like, oh, please do that. Thanks so much. It's just a machine. But the language is confusing to our brain. Our brain is like, oh gosh, it's English. It's not. I also want to call out that they have cut dates. Remember I said that the first step is they put in this giant statistical model. Well, when ChatGPT first came out, its cutoff was September of 2021. And people would put in there, tell me about the war in the Ukraine. And it didn't have any information about the latest invasion. It only had information about the Crimean War. And so people would write, oh, it's biased, oh, it's run by the Russians, blah, blah, blah. No, it just didn't have the up-to-date data. So whatever system you're using, you need to know when it's moving. And you'll always have to be careful because it's a probabilistic system. True or false? It either works or it doesn't work. There's nothing you can do about it. This is false. And it's really good that it's false because it gives us things to teach. The quality of the output is going to be a function of these three things. The product capabilities, the task you're actually asking it to do, and the prompt is how you're asking it. These three things combine in unique ways. Now, these systems continue to evolve. Sometimes they'll kind of get their own special data, either something you can do, or if you're going to use a specific data set that they want, that a company might want, might kind of sequester the data so they're not sharing with other people through ChatGPT. Sometimes people use the web. And you have to think about your expectations. Am I working in a mode where I want it to be creative? Or am I trying to do information retrieval? Or am I trying to do exploration? Again, it gets back to the hallucination idea. Are you asking it to do something novel and kind of hallucinatory? Or are you looking for an answer that maybe that's not the best use? In class, we talk about this acronym because all the customers, all the industry leaders say, well, you gotta be specific. And I went around for a whole year, like, what do you mean specific? And then I found this acronym. Context, give it a context, give it a role. The role is the same as the persona. The persona is when I say, you are an expert in university marketing. If you say you are an expert in translation, versus you don't say that, versus you say you're an expert in Chinese diplomatic translation, it can affect the behavior dramatically because it's got that whole 175 billion things going on. But if you say, no, you're just this little puppy in this little space here, it's going to help focus the kind of behavior behavior as. So the persona is very important. The action, obviously, the format and the target audience. Again, the persona is super important. But there's other things. Like if it doesn't do what you want, tell it to try again. Giving it examples is actually very important. Breaking it up into pieces. I'll tell you, a common mistake that we find in education is lots of times teachers want to make multiple choice questions. They say, make me a multiple choice question, give me 4 options, and make sure only one of them is correct. And it says, okay, great, here you go. Here's a question, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3. And you say, which one's correct? Okay, let me check. Option 1, not correct. Option 2, not correct. Option 3, not correct. Option 4, not correct. I'm like, dude, I said it. Only one of them has to be correct. And what's happening? The computer's like, you want words? I'm a word generator. You asked me for words, I gave you words. What's the problem? The problem is the process. What a human does in that context is a human makes the question, and then they make 1 right answer, and then they make 3 wrong answers. When you tell the system to do that, then it works. But if you just say, give me the whole thing, there's words. So the context really drives the kind of specification of the behavior. We showed how it's, we didn't show how. It's good at evaluation, but we can show that. Sometimes you're not sure how to talk to it. I need to ask you about a business plan for a small business in Indiana, but I'm not sure how to word it. And we'll come back and say, here's a prompt you can use. Or sometimes I get to do something like analyze a survey. I say, tell me how to ask you to do that so I can get the exact same thing the next time. If it's doing analytic work, I'll say, save that as a Python program or a computer program so I can get the exact same thing the next time. Believe it or not, telling it to think step by step helps. Because it activates words in a way that actually improves the performance in large spaces. There was actually an article last fall that said, tell it to take a deep breath and think step by step, it will work even better. We're all wondering whether that is really stupid and we're being made fun of by the computers or whether it's a real thing. I just have this picture in 5 years when I'm sitting around saying, John, can you believe what you taught your students and what you said the other day in those years? We're going to have to see. But the bottom line is, these systems, they're only as good as the person evaluating it. And so in the class, we spend a lot of time. How do you set up an assessment regimen? What are you looking for in that process? How do you decide whether something is good or not? How do you decide if it's a hallucination versus something that you just didn't expect? Before I do this last couple of true or false questions, I want to show you a complex prompt, okay? And this is a prompt that's kind of bundled up in a little place. And this is where I taught the system how to think the way I think about assessment, which is, in assessment, we want to make claims about a student, and to make the claim, we want to have evidence to support it, and then we want to see certain observations, and then we want to create activities or test items to get the observation, to get the evidence to make the claim. And that's why I teach it here. So I do all the things that I showed you guys as examples. I give you a car driving example, on and on and on. And then what we can do is we can just say, the claim is that the student understands and can communicate about the Gettysburg Address. And it's going to tell me what kind of things I should do to get evidence about that so that I can make my assessments. So it says, well, the student should know about the address text, they should know about the significant themes, they should be able to communicate about it, and here's the kind of things you would look for. Can a student paraphrase? Does the student understand the purpose? Can the student identify key themes? Can the student articulate? Can the student clearly express? Have the student write a short paragraph? Ask the student to write an essay? Facilitate a classroom debate? Blah, blah. This is what's happening in higher ed. We're combining our knowledge about how to teach with its knowledge about general kind of ideas. And so there's a tug of it's helpful, but we've got to be careful. And there's also a tug because I'm unique, and I have a PhD, and I have a special perspective, and I'm funnier than ChatGPT. So there's all these kind of tensions going on in these different interactions. I want to ask you this question. Do we still need to teach math now that we have calculators? Yes. What would happen if we didn't teach arithmetic and we just gave the first graders a calculator and said, yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Here's a calculator. What would be the problem with that? Yeah.
They wouldn't understand what they were doing.
They wouldn't understand what they were doing. So doing the process and understanding the process are two different things. And it's super important in evaluating the calculator when you put in 8 plus 8 and it says 432, you think, I must have typed wrong. But if you don't know how arithmetic works, you can't do that. I must have typed wrong. So then, do we need to teach the liberal arts now that we have generative AI? Anybody think we're done? Like, Alexia and I could just make some more like prompts and we're good? Yeah, it's complicated. Our roles, our jobs, as you saw already, my job's changed because of it. Your jobs are going to change. Things are going to continue to evolve. But we're in a dialogue about the best ways to work together as a community. So the change is going to continue to be fast and deep. But the only way to understand and manage the change is to have a deep liberal arts, which means big picture, really. Liberal arts just means big picture, fancy university words for big picture. Have a big picture view of everything going on. And that's what we're trying to do in our technology and digital studies program. We have just a few minutes for questions or comments. You guys have been great. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your time. A couple minutes for questions and comments.
Question for you.
Yeah.
How much are we part of the product, meaning as we prompt and react and respond, is that teaching the model and actually changing the outcomes?
Yeah, so it depends on the product. So some of the, like you'll see quite literally in the version that I use, because I'm concerned about security, it will literally say at the bottom, generative AI in the wild, spring 2024 workspace aren't used to train the models. ChatGPT can make mistakes. But other versions are not like that. Some versions, the default is they use your data and you have to turn it off. We for sure get a version where the default is it's not shared. Yeah. So there's different ways they do it in different systems. Yeah.
So basic question, when I tried to download ChatGPT, it asks either for my Apple ID or for my email address. How much does it invade my privacy?
So what's happening is that's happening because it's in the Apple ecosystem. And the Apple ecosystem is actually quite secure because what happens is Apple keeps your identity. I mean, you might have billing, for instance, for ChatGPT where they know your name and your credit card. But the other information, Apple in general does a good job keeping some of your information that Apple might have and doesn't necessarily share it with the end user. It really depends, but that's an Apple ecosystem thing that you're experiencing, not a ChatGPT thing. It's my impression.
So in other words, I could sign in using an email address as well and create a password and it would be just fine.
Yeah, you're talking about the free version?
Yes.
Yeah, so it will only know when you tell it. You know. So again, you guys have been fabulous. We feel super blessed to work with your students here at Notre Dame. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know. Thanks so much.